This is Maharajas of Scale, a podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to founders who are demolishing the myths around building and scaling a big business in India. These are the stories that have shattered the assumptions around Indian consumers and are changing the game completely. I am Krishna Jonakadla, serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Flit, the fashion locator in town, and startup mentor, bringing you these stories. Hey everyone, this is just after Deepavali on a sunny day in Bangalore. In fact, it was raining for the last several months. For some reason, rain doesn't actually create a perky mood with me. But here we are. The COVID transmission across the community is complete. But we have an interesting speaker today, Raghu Bharat of Cruscale, who's done something unprecedented. He's built a massive, I would say, mini army of freelancers across the world. So an army of freelancers that runs into the thousands. So to put things into perspective, for instance, Microsoft has close to 100,000 employees. All of our Indian IT companies have a little over a lakh. Some of them upwards of 50,000. So Raghu Bharat's Cruscale has several thousands, runs upwards of 60,000 freelancers today, which is very, very impressive. And somehow scale seems to be a part of it. So Raghu, awesome. Great to have you on the show. So any opening comments before we get started?
Yeah. Hey Krishna, good to connect. In fact, we're trying to do justice to the word scale. So I think that's, perfectly, I think that this podcast is really apt. I think even your name signifies that. I think we believe in the scale part in general, Krishna. Everything we do, even every atomic thing that we do, right? We always think of scale. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation, right? So because scale has been something in fact, even if you look at all our products, whether it's TalScale, Cruscale, so we are actually called the scalers internally, what our WhatsApp groups or Slack groups, everything and all. So I think this is probably an interesting conversation that we are going to have around scale. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So Raghu, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little more about what you're working on right now.
Sure. So did my graduation from Pilani. I did my computer science 2006 to 10. Then I'm more like a geeky personality, Krishna. When I started, it was so you could call me that typical computer science brought up with the inspiration around all the geeks and things like that. So I used to be that geeky kind of guy. So I was very passionate about computers, programming, especially the competitive programming and things like that. And I used to really love the way the programming and things like that. In fact, I used to really get kick out of just by programming, right? So whenever I see an output for a program like that, that's probably the most excited moments for me in general. If I can recount things back and things like that. So I was always a believer in the entrepreneurship as well, Krishna. I think somehow it got into. So there's a slight background to this. My dad comes from a business background, whereas my mom is more of an academician. She's a teacher, professor, and things like that. So probably an interesting mix of education plus business is what I have seen in my family from childhood. A combination of these two. I think probably I evolved into that. I was always I was pretty sure that at some point I'm going to start something on my own. That was a revelation I had from early phases in my career. So did my computer science graduation, then I started my career in a telecom company, more of a programmer and tech lead kind of stuff. So it's called Avaya. 20,000 people, pretty large, massive organization. They're a spin of Bell Labs, AT&T and things like that. So I was working with them. So I could So while working with them, right? So what used to happen? In fact, there's a very interesting story, Krishna, here. So they used to be the leaders in telephony, on-premise telephony. I still remember the big data centers and things like that. We used to work. We used to go physically to that machine, debug and things like that. So the world was. This is around 2010 time frame. The world was evolving towards cloud. So in fact, cloud was picking that up. Things like AWS are becoming very prominent and things like that. So I used to drive things inside the company, especially in Avaya, to go towards cloud. You might have heard of this company called Twilio. Twilio now is a public listed company, pretty large, about $40-50 billion, and their stock is on tear, like given what's happening with the telecom and all. So Twilio was nothing at that time. 2010, it was still upcoming, and I was trying to push our company to go towards cloud. I think I could see that so every company has its own priorities. Given the way structured, they do have their own quarterly targets, their business targets and things like that. It's very hard. Sometimes it becomes a tricky situation. You're also cannibalizing your own existing business by moving towards cloud, and so the equation wasn't not really set up well, right? So I could sense at that time itself that the value of innovation. If an idea can be picked pretty good, if there is a very good product, and if you can take it out and you can execute from scratch, the potential of that, right? I could see that literally in front of my eyes, and that was my first genuine touch with entrepreneurship in general, Krishna. So that was something like eye opener. So interestingly, I was the best performer award for the first 2 years at Avaya, out of 21,000 employees. So I used to be pretty good in terms of programming and things like that. So pretty good in terms of highest rated in those first 2 years. So I always wanted to outdo myself or the peers in general and things like that. So being that kind of guy. So I wanted to do a startup in general, Krishna, so wanted to get into that, but I wasn't very sure about. So I'm talking about 2011, 2012. There's no Flipkart hasn't raised their $1 billion round, and there's no Ola, there's nothing. So the ecosystem is very, very, very still nascent. The way I put it, very, very nascent. Interesting times at that time, but there are few outliers, especially in my batch and few from college and things like that. Some of the seniors and all. So I think they gave me good exposure to what's entrepreneurship. So I got in touch with a couple of folks from US, entrepreneurs who have done and things like that and all. So got into some of the circles and things like that. So wanted to get in. I think the curiosity has driven me towards it. I think more than anything else, I think now probably it's a very cool thing to be an entrepreneur, $1 billion unicorn. And I think at that point it was pretty. You're an outlier or you're a crazy person if you're getting into that. Right? So I think I come from those times, Krishna, in general. So I wanted to be part of a startup before getting fully into a startup. So Cruisecale is the latest startup I'm on to, Krishna. So before that, I did MyWash, which is a hyperlocal logistics startup. So based in Bangalore. We raised close to $2 million in funding from both Oreos venture partners, Mumbai-based partners, and Singapore and Japanese investors. This is 2014 timeframe, and we have seen scale. Literally, we hit the accelerator the moment money was in the account. So we were running super crazy. Literally scaling, blitz scaling, right? So I would put the word blitz scaling, literally burning cash. And so B2C startups, you tend to the reason why you want to scale faster, especially in a B2 setup, is so winner takes all markets. So it's generally a winner takes all market. There is so crazy amount of value for the winner. Right, so we saw that across multiple things, whether it's in e-commerce in US, Amazon, whether it's in China, Alibaba, or whether it's in search. Google probably has about 90-95% search share compared to the second competitor. I think winner takes the biggest chunk of the market, especially in internet business. So the only way is to scale, literally blitz scale, and just go to that winner, whatever it takes to get to that. Right, so I think that's the phase we were running. So we want to be the best in terms of home services market and things like that. So I think 2015 timeframe, I think the whole hyperlocal wave was slowing down. We could see a lot of shutdowns like TinyOwl and things like that, so food delivery and few of the impact around that. So in fact, we were actually in discussion with this investor called Naspers. So Naspers, we had literally a term sheet, India's largest series at that time. That was 13 million at that time and things like that. So then the market slowed down a lot. The hyperlocal wave, the thesis on that has become pretty weak and things like that. So still we were running pretty fast. When we were doing about we were about 300 people. That has so I was just 24, 25 at that time, and at that kind of scale at which it was growing pretty. So it was pretty insane, I would say that way, right? At that time, it was pretty insane. So we were doing about $1,000 a day, and MyWash has become a pretty good, strong brand, in terms of people and things like that. So I did it with my batchmates from Pilani, and there. So I think that was a fortunate thing, Krishna. Like, I always surround myself with the right set of people. Like, entrepreneurship has its own challenges. Like, it's pretty hard as well sometimes. It's very lonely at the top as well, and it's very unforgiving, the way I put it, right? But I think I always surround with the right set of people, right set of folks, and all. They act as the cushion, they act as the support system, and things like that. So that is fortunate to get the right set of partners in both the startups. Like, so now MyWash got acquired by HouseJoy. HouseJoy is a home services Amazon funded company. It's still. So then I worked with HouseJoy for a while, close to a year, as a product manager, mainly to manage the migration, transfer, and things like that. So I think once an entrepreneur, it's very hard to get back to a job. So it was. So I think for me, it's the unfinished journey. So I felt that I couldn't really finish building a large company. I think I wanted to do something. I think that's how CruiseScale was born. So there's between CruiseScale and HouseJoy, there is a period 1 year that was like a crazy period for me. I'll share interesting few. So I'll share few interesting experiences that happened during this period. So after HouseJoy, so I wanted to figure out what next. So I was on to the next set of idea and things like that. So while doing that, this is about 2016 time frame. So this is 2016 time frame. So I think now everyone knows what is remote work from home. I think everybody across the world, right? Literally, even my mom, my parents, they know this term remote. So, right. So I think the world has. I think the pandemic has changed the entire world in terms of remote. But I was talking about 2016, Krishna. Where people, people can't even fathom the fact that so you can have a fully remote career, right? So I think I have few good hypotheses and thesis around this, so that actually helped me to build strong thesis on it. So fundamentally, in short, CruiseScale is a remote marketplace for all the it's a community of remote freelancers who want to be having a good career in terms of remote. I think in short, that's the story about CruiseScale. And we are 200 people strong, 200 plus. We recently acquired a company in US called Indies.io, growing pretty strong. Literally our metrics are to the roof. I would call pandemic as the demonetization moment for payment apps. The way demonetization changed the equation for Paytm or any of this UPI or digital payments in general, right? Literally transformed suddenly. I think a very similar moment happened in front of our eyes. Literally, history was written in front of our eyes, right? So I think that's a way. I think we'll understand the significance of it over a period of time. I think probably while we are passing through this, we are not able to fully understand that. But I think the future is remote and more digital work is what our thesis is, Krishna. That's more CruiseScale.
Interesting. You covered a lot there in that. I want to go back to your starting days at Avaya, where you looked at what Twilio was doing, because Twilio was still a very fledgling startup at that time. I remember way back in 2009 in Dallas, Texas, I was part of. I pitched my first startup. It was. You heard of Magic Pin, haven't you?
Yeah, Magic Pin, I'm aware of the hyperlocal.
So where you stop at local outlets and you snap a picture of the bill or the invoice or the check, and then you get reward points for it. So in 2009, there is a event called the Startup Weekend that happens in the US.
Okay.
Essentially, the format of the event is that on a Friday evening, a bunch of people who are enthusiastic about startups, who either want to work with a startup or want to launch a startup of their own, get together. Everybody pitches their idea. And all of them, so those ideas get voted. So the top ideas with the top 10 ideas by number of votes are declared. And people recruit their team live from the crowd.
Interesting.
So from Friday night, whatever they need to do to showcase their startup, they do that. On Sunday evening, they present the results. And there are a bunch of investors that will look at it. So I teamed up with another, I think, guy called Jensen. My whole idea was exactly what Magic Pin is today.
Interesting. Okay.
And I called it Moped.
Okay.
Way back then, because I wanted it to feel a little fancy, and then
I like the name. I was about to say that. Yeah, I think it's a pretty catchy one. Yeah.
So we called it Moped, and we pitched the idea, and we built a prototype and showed people how this was going to happen. The angle that we could not dig into at that point in time was monetizing all the data that comes from the backend in terms of, so X person shopped at this Y place, and therefore I could introduce Z to him or A to him. That's exactly the backend dynamics that's going on when people actually upload their receipts, right? A lot of other things are happening. What sort of promotions are businesses running? What sort of pricing? So Magic Pin at the backend has lots of data.
Yeah, it's a data play. This is a data game, Krishna.
It's a huge data play.
Yeah.
Those days, the play on data was not evident at all. Facebook was still in its infancy, 2009, and this was an idea which was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
In some sense, there were prevailing practices in the US. So, for instance, retailers, what they would do is, let's say, way back when Walmart, Kmart, and Sears were competing with each other. And you have a lot of these big box retailers competing with each other. They run one of the marketing tricks or the tactics that they employ is you bring in a coupon.
Got it.
Of your competitor.
Got it.
Or rather, our competitor.
Got it.
And I will extend the same discount to you.
Interesting. Okay.
So so if you are for instance Walmart and Target, which is a competitor of Walmart, so Walmart will say, bring Target's coupons to us.
Coupon or bill. Yeah, got it. Right? I'll give you the same. Yeah.
I'll give you the same. Most recently, for people who are movie fans, they'll see this tactic employed by the entrepreneur in Miss India, the movie Miss India.
Yeah, recent one. Yeah.
So the competing coffee shop tells.
Yeah, you get the same one. Yeah.
Correct. So what this does is creates a dynamic. So one is it does. These coupons vary across different markets. So one market might be a different popular product, a different sort of a invoice amount. So these were the ways in which those campaigns were being done back then.
Got it. Everything offline, I guess, like even pretty.
It was offline. Correct. With data, the whole data play sort of becoming a reality mid 2014, 2015, right? When the whole world was awash with a lot of data.
Yeah.
So similar to that, if you see, the funny thing is people think 2014-15 was the only high. Instacart today, which is actually where Big Basket actually gets all of its inspiration.
Yeah, I think Webvan or something, right? I read that story. Yeah, read that story, Krishna.
Webvan raised almost a similar mind-boggling, $1 billion or $2. This was way back in 1996.
Yeah.
And in I think 2007, I remember watching some sort of a documentary of a CEO who chronicled his entire late 90s fly high crash and burn story.
Got it.
It was about a startup called Cosmo.
I know this. This is a hyper-local delivery, very similar to your Instacart. So I like reading history a lot. Somehow, Krishna, I went through all this. I think pretty interesting stories and the way they went up. And I think very interestingly, one data point, Krishna, like Amazon, I think invested in Cosmo or was about to invest in Starbucks. Okay. Yeah, Starbucks. Yeah.
He announced a strategic partnership with Starbucks.
Got it.
And, in that documentary. So the CEO of Cosmo, in fact, Howard Schultz, who's the Starbucks founder, together they're on stage announcing that partnership.
Interesting.
And these are pre-iPhone, pre-Steve Jobs era.
This is like pre-2000, right? Literally, I think pre.com. Yeah.
And then when you analyze that, in fact, all of the things that Cosmo, the CEO, talks about it's just contextual there, because today you have Grubhub, you have DoorDash, you have Swiggy, you have all of them have succeeded.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, many times when you hear stories like that, and when you see products succeed, you have to ask questions like build what people want, it actually goes out of the window, right? So maybe there is a time where when too much innovation happens, people just cannot make sense of it. That's possibly what happened in the late 90s. But out of that, in that era, there is an interesting story, which is Circuit City, if you're to the name. So just like we have Reliance Digital in India, which is and then we have Chroma. So the US equivalents are two companies, which is Best Buy and Circuit City. There is also another company called Fry's Electronics, but Fry's is like this massive warehouse. But a more consumerish, consumer-facing electronics giants were Best Buy and then Circuit City. Best Buy is older than Circuit City. Circuit City was born. Best Buy's claim to fame was, I'll have very, very knowledgeable technicians who will guide you to the product that you want. And Circuit City emulated that model and did a fabulous job. And I think somewhere they didn't manage their financial angle well. Before they went bankrupt and they shut down. The funny thing is, while those guys were working on at Circuit City, the Circuit City leadership put together an innovation team. And they said, if we have to survive as a sort of an entity idea,
whatever, the
enterprise.
This is
Beyond, we have to disrupt ourselves. And the disruption either means we don't exist or we work on a totally new idea.
Something that will either cannibalize this or
cannibalize or something totally new.
Different.
But they realized that in order to create new ideas, you needed to house it outside of the idea. Just like the saying goes, nothing grows beneath a big tree, right?
That's right.
So these guys created a team, and out of that came CarMax.
Interesting.
CarMax survives, thrives, and today it's a multi-billion-dollar organization.
Much bigger than the previous mother entity, right?
Today, all of the clones that we have in India, which is Gaadi 27 or 24, Cars 24, all of them are CarMax copies. I respect all the founders. They must have found inspiration in CarMax. But if anybody is telling that it's a new take,
we have seen this story repeat already. That's right.
So it's funny that you should talk about how when you were looking at Twilio, you realize that when you have to make something successful, first is you disrupt yourself. Because you don't know when you are going to get disrupted.
That's right. If not for us, I think somebody else will do that, right?
Correct. But the lesson in there is that first, obviously disrupt yourself, and the method is house it outside.
I think that's a good idea, Krishna. I think because internally it's very hard, just like you mentioned, right? Like even under a big tree, it's very hard to grow, right? So
there is a reason for that, Raghu. So, so for instance, let's say today you are in Swiggy, right? Let's say for instance, today the entire management, the way they run their company with all the metrics and all of that, while I've not spoken to any of them, but if you look at it, the commission per order, or the time taken to deliver, and net promoter score from each and every order. So then there are cohorts in each of them. And then you look at promotions, you look at festival ups and downs. I'm oversimplifying it. But that's the world they know. And if you have to judge a new idea, you're wearing all of these lenses.
Exactly. I think that's a brilliant point, Krishna. I think it's about I think that's very, very, very true. I think you need to have a very different perspective and a fresh without having the baggage of the old thinking and things like that, right?
It is hard. It is hard because you have multiple functions. So marketing can't understand that model. Accounting doesn't know how to analyze that model. And people who are in teams of strategy will have no idea. They have no benchmark.
That's right. That's right.
Evaluate any of that, which is why most of the time innovation under a large tree doesn't necessarily happen unless and until it is purposefully done. And if it has to be purposefully done, it has to be housed outside. And the predecessor to internet is DARPA, right? So the internet which the US military created.
The DARPA one.
True. But unless and until internet came outside of the US,
it didn't really see its potential.
So in some sense, so interesting. You should talk about it. I want to go back to the MyWash story.
Sure.
Why MyWash? What prompted you to do MyWash? Because you came from a telecom background. And I know, B2C. I personally love B2C businesses. For a couple of reasons. Because of the massive impact it can create, the scale it can accomplish, and if done well, it can transform markets.
That's right.
B2B can also happen, but B2B is a lot more incremental in nature. There are definitely paradigm-changing B2B businesses, but there is an allure to B2C.
So I think it's the way I put it mathematically, Krishna. I think it's a logarithm versus linear, right? So B2B is more linear in my view. To build it consistently, and it takes it very different dynamics, Krishna. The way I look at these businesses, right? In fact, very interestingly, I did a B2C VC funded startup. And now I'm doing a B2B bootstrap startup. So these two are very, very different, right? So just to answer your question, Krishna, so in fact, our thesis was we wanted to get into home services. I think of the likes of Housejoy or Urban Clap. I think Urban Company now it's called. So our thesis was we felt we had a very similar thesis, Krishna. Home services entire domain was completely fragmented and very hard to get reliability out of it. Just like you mentioned, I actually spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs in the US who did home services startup in '96 and failed. To take their feedback. So my thesis on this was so probably this time it's different. Ultimately I believe startup is all about the timing. So that's my way of the lens I look at evaluate idea. Does it have the right inflection point to sustain and things like that? So I was probably that way. So we felt home services at that time needs to be disrupted, Krishna. We were looking at just like e-commerce, if you look at e-commerce, it has multiple categories: books, electronics, clothes, apparel, and things like that, right? So home services also is very fragmented. You have electricians, plumbers, carpenters, you have laundry, you have beauticians. It's a yoga teachers, yoga trainers, gym instructors. It's a very fragmented one. We wanted to pick one category, which has very high repeat. Electricians, carpenters, and all the frequency is something we weren't very comfortable building a business. In fact, there's a very interesting statement. If an electrician did the right job, that's a churn for you. So you will not call him again. Right. So that's a very interesting. I'll share those thoughts later. But
certainly,
at a high level, we wanted to come back with so we want to pick something that is very frequent. Frequent, high frequency, vertical, just like Flipkart started with books, just to give some parallel there. So either we could have done beauty or laundry, right? So one of this is what we felt high frequency. Beauty, something we couldn't understand. Probably we 3R guys, so we couldn't really understand that category. So that's how we started MyWash. In fact, the thesis was much larger. We want to pick one category, go deep, and then go wider, right? That was the real thinking behind that, Krishna, in terms of starting MyWash. And so what happened was, by the time we were probably still the largest in terms of how we scale laundry as a domain, hyperlocal logistics for that domain, right? We probably still I think nobody out executed us even today. So after I think it's probably about 5 years from now, I don't think anybody really cracked. So in fact, the Housejoy acquisition happened. In fact, we also had an offer from Urban Clap, and there was one more home services play called Zimber. All three guys were behind us for the acquisition. Because laundry is a very crucial category to get that high frequency. Otherwise, you'll keep spending money on CAC. You just keep acquiring customers. So your customer acquisition cost is really high. To get a very infrequent services like electricians and things like that. When you keep spending, how many times you need to show your digital ad to get so it's a very tough business to build that way. Interesting times at that time, Krishna. I think we were able to do that category really well. In fact, a lot of respect and the way brand we were able to build. in the ecosystem. We built that pretty strong. Like we were sticklers for customer service. So we literally had the best customer service. At that time, it was a buzzing brand in Bangalore. Like when the pay, we used to give bags and things literally. So the proud moment, the good moments were so I was traveling on a flight to a different location. I could see 2 MyWash bags in the cabin baggage. Those were like small moments, moments of joy. Those are the best moments I had. Whatever stuff I did. So I think there's one slide, one step. If I take a step back, Krishna, so I think that was the time I was actually contemplating whether to go for an MBA. I wrote CAT. I got a pretty high percentile. I was debating whether to go for an MBA or to do a startup. Somehow I picked doing a startup. So that was I would say literally like a crash course MBA. So it was like MBA on steroids, right? I think doing a startup on yourself is you'll get to know everything: marketing, sales, finance, you name it, you have it types. So I think that was a pretty interesting decision at that time. Yeah.
So I always get a little surprised when people talk about MBAs, especially people who've been out there in the wild.
Yeah.
And there is sort of an Americanism called for people who just educated themselves and then succeeded in life, and didn't get a college degree or didn't get an MBA degree. So if anybody asks them, "Did you go to college?" "Yes, I go." Which college did you go to? They respond saying, "I went to the School of Hard Knocks."
Got it. I get what you're saying. Got it. Yeah.
Because life knocks you hard all the time.
Yeah.
It's their way of saying, I literally learned life the hard way.
No, I think life is the best teacher ever, Krishna. More than any university or anything. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So looks like you did a practical MBA as opposed to doing a theoretical one.
Yeah.
But that's fantastic. But I'm still a little intrigued. Why B2C at that time?
Sure. So I think there's a bit of coolness to the B2C generally, Krishna. I think probably I'll be very transparent and honest here. I think what went in my mind, right? So I think when you're really young, right? When you go for when you want to go really big, especially I'm that kind of guy. So either you go all in or so I think B2B was how do you put it, right? More of a lifestyle business. You build it incrementally, just like you mentioned, right? So I think probably the age, I think you could call the hot blood or things like that. So I think it was for me go all in, and I think there's a bit of 2-3 factors I looked at, Krishna. One is you can create a large impact. Your brand will touch everyone. Look at how sweet to touch. Whereas in a B2B world, you probably won't be known. Even if you made $1 billion, it will be tricky because you're not impacting the lives of anyone, right? So I think there is a good, how do you put it, right? There's a real coolness to if you can build a brand that is synonymous with everyone, right? So I think there's a very good coolness. I could see that. So I think that was the exciting factor for me. I wanted to do something large. That was the intention, Krishna, at that time.
You know what's the funny thing? 2014, the NASSCOM guys every year organize something called as a product council, right?
Yeah.
So 2014, before launching my startup at that point in time, I attended the NPC.
Okay.
In the kickoff session was a guy by a guy called BV Jagdish.
Okay.
He's an entrepreneur who's made I think 100 million or so in some B2B startup. And he did, I don't think he was the opening keynote, but he was in a series of keynotes.
Sure.
So there were possibly about 4,000 or 5,000 people in the room. So in his opening comment, his opening was, how many of you here are working on a B2C startup?
Got it.
So in that entire 5,000 people, 2 people put up their hands.
Interesting. Okay.
One was me, and there was another guy with a identical idea like mine.
Got it.
So he said, I wish you best of luck. And then I'm interested in the guys who are building B2B.
Okay.
So he was literally like, okay, you 2 fools out of here,
Yeah.
You guys have you guys have no clue what you're doing with your life.
You're doing. Yeah.
So I have made my millions in this whatever B2B. So therefore, I have a predictable path to making wealth. So you guys, you guys don't.
You're still clueless. Yeah, that way clueless. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I've never. Making money is important.
Yeah.
I will not even pretend for a second that making wealth is not important. But we also have to do some things that we are passionate about.
Yeah.
And, no matter how much hardship, I've never given up my sort of passion or fascination for building a B2C startup. It's a longer journey.
Yeah.
The odds sometimes feel like are not in your favor.
That's right.
But I think the tools that are available today make it different.
Yeah.
So Mahesh Murthy, who is one of India's well-known investors, he's got this theory, right? What do you think Redbus is? Is it B2B or B2C?
So I think it was actually a mix of both because I know Funny very well. He's my senior from Pilani. So they had the B2B inventory management the first time they got for seed seller or something was their product name. If I remember correctly. Yeah. So I think that was the game changer in the bus booking domain.
That came much later. In fact, their original stories, they were all about ticketing software.
That's right. Yeah.
Then eventually inventory. So they went to, the story has not come out. But if you look at it, the final version of it that actually scaled is a B2C version.
B2C, yeah.
It wasn't like they tied up with IBM and then 100 IBMers wanted to go to Hyderabad and that was a bulk ticket. That is not
So
it's a B2C version. So what Mahesh Murthy and there are Kunal Shah, a bunch of these they have their own theories, but the crux of it is that our life is getting more and more interesting, variety driven and complicated at the same time. So
I think variety is the entropy is becoming more Krishna. That's
correct. So what it means is you have one thing to do this, one thing to do that, one thing to do that, which is why the winner takes all.
Yeah.
So today PhonePe wants to do like 100 different things.
Multiple things, yeah.
But if you see 95% of what PhonePe does, possibly it's only two things. One is people pay bills or people transfer money.
Yeah.
Now, but that's the crux. So the market is thinking, in my mind, I do not have space to do multiple things.
That's right. Yeah.
So I remember PhonePe for fund transfer. I remember something else for something else. So I associate each one of them. So Mahesh Murthy says he uses a label called remarkable. What is the one thing remarkably that you do? So which explains people will not. So for instance, there is Facebook Messenger. There is Yahoo Messenger, there is iMessage, but you'll still do WhatsApp. So
Krishna, I just need a 1 minute break. I think somebody is at the door.
Let's pause.
Yeah.
So if you've done this one thing remarkably, and then you build something around it, then that is where that becomes the inflection point for scale. There is still like the coronavirus thing has so many angles to it. It is like each one of these topics is like an elephant, right? In 2015, I still remember Jeff Bezos when he came to India. He said fashion is our number one category. It is our fastest growing category. But today, when we see outside of Myntra, that sort of thing has really stagnated, right? There is definitely online fashion. But fashion is a business whereby that physical touch, trying out.
I think it hit its own limitation beyond that penetration, right?
Correct. Yeah. So e-commerce will get into areas, but it is not necessarily some of the common thoughts around why it scaled may not necessarily be completely true.
Yeah. In fact, just to add to that, Krishna, so the way I look at it, it's like B2C is probably playing like a T20, right? Whereas B2B is more like a test cricket. So I think that's the way I look at in general, probably analogous to that. Yeah.
Isn't it reverse, Raghu? Because B2C takes longer to succeed.
I think probably longer, because I think so. Two things here, Krishna. Like I think it needs a different mindset, is what I feel. Like I mean, you either has to go all in. Like I mean, so I don't see you look at, let's say, food delivery, for example, right? Like I mean, so probably there were 20-30 players or more than 100 4-5 years back. So it's consolidating into two. Like I mean, right now it's a duopoly. Like I mean, whether it's Swiggy, Zomato, right? Maybe in 2-3 years there might be only one. It's going to be a monopoly. Like I mean, so whoever executes, it's a long game. It's a very long game. That's definitely given. But I think it's about winning that. Like I mean, so it's about only. Whereas in B2B, Krishna, even today, if you look at CRM market, there might be hundreds of. So there won't be a clear winner. Probably the winner has like 20% market share or things like that, right?
Right.
So I think that's the way differently I look at Krishna.
No, definitely. Which is why I'm saying it's a much more longer game.
Yeah.
B2C, and although people feel like they need to succeed overnight, in B2B, the revenue making angle sort of reveals itself rather quickly.
That's right. So I think B2B is more sustainable, Krishna. Like I mean, so whereas B2C I see is still a lottery.
Why do you think the 4,998 people there in NASSCOM Product Council did not put up their hand for B2C? We are a nation obsessed with safety.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's the risk appetite, right? I think it's the risk appetite as well. Yeah.
I don't know, Raghu. There is this TED talk about innovation. And there are a couple of guys that talk about a great deal of research that they've done about why India doesn't get counted as a nation that innovates. And then they go on to debunk the myth in that, saying that there is a lot of innovation that is happening in India, but it's just not happening on the consumer side.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. If you see our, let's say, Micromax, Lava, all these are, they're emulating Chinese manufacturers, right? And when you actually start digging deeper, you'll also start realizing that we have consciously and unconsciously, with bad policy, killed manufacturing to an extreme extent. That for you to create products, there is no ecosystem.
That's right. I think ecosystem is the fundamental. See, if the way I look at Krishna, like we are a derivative on the ecosystem, whether it's any ecosystem, right? I think ecosystem is the key missing piece in the puzzle. I see, Krishna. Yeah.
But there is an outlier in all of that. There is a very interesting outlier story even in that, Raghu. You know what? That ecosystem. If you read the Phil Knight's Nike story. The first first decade, close to a decade, when he starts Nike, there is a coach called Bowerman, who's actually his partner.
Okay.
So Phil Knight, he's done a terrific job with that memoir. He himself sort of confesses that he's unremarkable. He didn't.
Got it.
Bowerman was the genius.
Got it.
Who was such a terrific track coach. That he knew what kind of shoe would work for the athletes. So what Phil Knight does is he contracts with a Japanese manufacturer.
Got it.
Think of Portland, Oregon. And although Portland, Oregon and Japan, are right next to each other in the Pacific Ocean, but otherwise it's still a world apart.
Yeah, it's a very different continents and things like that.
Other than the fact that the Japanese were known in the US at that time, in the 80s when Nike really took off, because of their auto market and electronics.
Manufacturing. They stood for.
But otherwise, there was no ecosystem. The ecosystem that really existed was not the supply side, but the demand side.
I think, so you have the customers there. I think you have the market there.
Which we still do in India, right? So the demand side ecosystem has existed, will exist. Even the sheer size of our nation.
Population.
Right? But the thing is, somewhere along the way, we have said we keep telling ourselves a lot of lies in terms of safety, security, that prevents us. So anyway, we've digressed a lot. Let's come back to Cruise Scale.
Yeah, and just before that, Krishna, I want to add one point. In fact, I come from a pretty patriotic and nationalistic family. In fact, that's why my name Bharat as well. So a lot of friends suggested, why don't you do like just get to US and do something, right? Like, I mean, so things like that. So, but I think my intention was to build something here. Like, I mean, really, I want to make justice to my name as well, like my personal name as well. So I think that's another reason I have been pretty much in India, Krishna. Like, I want to build. Whether it's B2C, B2B, because I feel probably this is going to be a big opportunity. It's, I think, being pivoted in the Indian market. That's my thesis. I think let's see how it evolves. I believe in whatever you said as well. I think there are few gaps in the ecosystem and things like that. I think let's see how it goes.
So then let's get started with the Cruisecale story. In 2015-16, this gap after you exited HouseJoy, you were contemplating. And then you thought about remote work. So talk about the genesis of Cruisecale.
Yeah. So this is so I'm more like a nomadic in general, Krishna. Like, I mean, I just like to travel. Like, I mean, so I generally like, I mean, now everything is on pause. 2020 has put on a pause. So personally, I have traveled about 43 countries, Krishna. Like, personally, so far, right? In fact, one of my life goal is to travel to about 180. Let's see where I will end up in general while doing that. So, but I wanted to pursue the travel passion, Krishna. Like, I mean, at that time, this is about 2015 time frame for the acquisition. So I think while let's say you are doing a fully job, right? Like, I mean, a full-fledged job, it's very hard for you to take time out, especially if you're in a management layer or when you have more responsibility on you, things like that. So I was for the first time evaluating this remote work. Like, I mean, I bumped into a company in Europe. It's actually another very large telecom company, Genesys. So I was part of their data science machine learning team. So I'm naturally a Python machine learning programming guy. So I reached out to them. Interestingly, they posted a job for remote. This is way 2016 time frame. So I wanted to try it out. I also heard about TopTal and Upwork, marketplaces like TopTal and Upwork. So Upwork has been there from a while. TopTal was disrupting Upwork, like, I mean, through a premium, high quality, filtered, vetted, assessed talent. So I got onto both these platforms. I started exploring. So it was pretty new at that time in India, Krishna, like, just to living like a freelancer. So people will think that if you're a contractor in India, you don't have a job. Or if you're a freelancer, you don't have a job, right? So I think the mindset is still not there. Like, I think the ecosystem, the workforce paradigm and things like that. So, but I had like three theses in general, Krishna, at a high level, right? So if I looked at my parents' career, like, I mean, so for my mom, it was only one job. She joined and she'll probably retire in the same one, right? So probably if one slight generation above us, like, I mean, so probably they would have done about 5 to 10 jobs in their career, in their overall career. Probably we'll end up doing more. Like, I mean, so like, I mean, our generation and things like that. So effectively, what I mean by that is there is a definitive trend of work becoming shorter in terms of your association with a company. So that effectively means that I think more and more contracting, freelancing work is the thesis. And we have seen already in this playing across European and US markets, Krishna. Like, so the freelancers in US are like, I mean, already crossed. They're literally Google, which is considered to be a big product company, now has more freelancers than their full-time employees. Like, so this is in tech alone, right? So I could see this trend playing out. I think the second thing was, Krishna, like, I mean, I felt physical work maxed out. Like, I mean, so look at traffic across Bangalore or Bay Area or anywhere, right? I think this problem is everywhere. It's not, I could see the same problem in Bay Area as well. Like, it's the same thing, right? Like, when you probably had to do 1.5 hour commute for your office and things like that. So the real significant reason, Krishna, like, and so given my telecom background, right? So 2010, so we used to have this network called Edge. Then we got into 2G. Then we got 3G, 4G. Now we're at the cusp of 5G, right? So there is a 10,000x difference between Edge and 5G. Krishna, like, let's say. In 10 years, we have seen the world digital. So I call this the digital highway. Like, I mean, so digital highways have become 10,000x in terms of the capacity expansion, right? Whereas the physical roads are still there. They probably moved at a phase of 2x, 3x. And in fact, more people onto the road. The physical infrastructure is not scaling as per the digital infrastructure. I think that's the fundamental thesis I had, Krishna. Like, I felt that I think more and more digital work will happen, given more collaborative tools like Slack. It was upcoming at that time. It was becoming very popular. Like, I mean, you could just disappear. You could do a bunch of coding. You could raise PR, pull requests and things like that. You can get back and get your work done seamlessly. And so 10 years back, like, I mean, so if I had to debug an issue, I used to go to that physical server. Whereas with AWS, if you have access to your server credentials, you could be anywhere across the globe. You don't need to be an IT server close to the server or something of that sort. I think I could see that more and more collaborative tools, more of this infrastructure changing and all. I think the work is evolving into fully remote. I think I was a bit early, just like you mentioned, 2015. I was a bit early to this thesis, like, I mean, and I wanted to do something there, Krishna. I think then I started exploring these platforms like TopTal and Upwork. So personally, on Upwork alone, I made probably about 200K just in the first year. So there was real crazy money as well, like, because I was being in India and I was able to earn in dollars. Like, so this is the monetary part as well, and I was also able to get a cutting edge technology. Like, I mean, I was able to work across the cutting edge technology teams. Like, I was able to do that cutting edge work. So I was also had the freedom to travel across. Like, I mean, so that was like nirvana for me. Like, I mean, if I have all these three, I think I was like, what else I would need, right? Like, so what else I would need? Like, I mean, if I have the freedom to travel, if I have the monetary things sorted, and if I had the life work satisfaction in terms of the cutting edge work I'm doing, and what else I was like, I mean, so that was like pretty eye opener for me, Krishna. And I actually wanted to get this spread. Like, I mean, so that was the thesis how Cruisecale was born. Like, I mean, so I wanted to spread this revolution remote. So I was probably one of the early guys who picked that and tested the waters initially, that somebody can really do a career out of this fully. And so I think that's how Cruisecale was born, Krishna, in short.
So that's interesting. You were yourself a successful freelancer, and in some sense you were living the dream, so to speak. I still remember in 2011, I was flying from actually 2010, flying from Dallas to Manila, Philippines. And I was flying business San Francisco, connected in San Francisco, all the way to I think Tokyo. So there was a guy next to me, and he looked like a rather really young guy. I mean, I myself was in my late 20s back then, and this guy looked like he was 23, 24. And so we just started chatting, and I asked him what he did. He was a freelancer. I forget his profession, what exactly he was doing as a freelancer way back in that time. Yep. His formula was he would work 9 months in a year, freelancing in the US. He would fly business wherever he traveled,
living his life,
and he would live in live in Bangkok or Thailand or Singapore or Hong Kong for a month each, and he would come back and he would work another 9 months again. So that seemed pretty interesting to me. So I think what you are sharing is echoing, somewhat similarly. And then, then obviously there was Upwork, there was TopTal, and then how did you want to position yourself? So what was the starting point?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Krishna. I think a lot of people miss why Cruisecale, right? Like, I mean, you already have Upwork and TopTal, so why Cruisecale? What's the differentiation, right? So while working on Upwork and TopTal, Krishna, like, I could see glaring gaps. So in fact, if you really look at it, so TopTal is not very much penetrated in India, right? So what you need to do is in India, right? So in India or countries like that, you are not still used to that freelancing mindset. Like, I mean, you need to give more consistency to that candidates, developers in general. So I'll give you a perspective, Krishna. Like, so when I was talking to, in fact, we have people from ex-Amazon, ex-Microsoft, ex-LinkedIn. So we were able to get pretty high quality talent on board of this ship. Like, I mean, so we are about 180 plus developers. We're about 180 plus developers spread across, and these are like pretty high quality tier 1 talent. Like, We have about like 50-60 IITians, 30-40 BITSians, NITs, IIITs, and things like that. Like, so these are like hand-picked, really filtered candidates. I think for us it was like more of evangelizing this like in India, right? So it was very hard convincing that guy who was working in Amazon to pick this lifestyle. Right. So unless after he saw me, like, how I was living this dream and what it can get to you, right? Like, so I think he was pretty convinced on that, and he jumped onto this bandwagon. And our thesis was to get more and more wider people into this bandwagon, which TopTal wasn't able to do that because so you need to still give them a kind of security, a sense of security. Let's say for people in India, right? So if I go to a developer who is working in Google, and if I say him that I'll pay you $1 per hour, he doesn't understand. Like, so if I say your notice period is only 5 days or your notice period is 1 day. So what we did, we flipped the model. Like, we did that local innovation. We got that model into local. So we hire people on Indian CTC. Like, so I get the same Google guy. He will definitely get at a much larger, like, so let's say he's getting at 30 lakhs working in Google in India. So he'll get about 50-60 lakhs. But whereas we make sure that he's always optimized, he's always kind of, so, and we get those only tier 1, top 1%. So our thesis was also that the top people, like, especially the high quality people, they don't have dearth of work. Like, so they definitely always constantly keep getting. So that was our thesis, and that's how we started. There were 2-3 more missing pieces as well, Krishna. Like, so this is more from the programmer angle, developer angle. The Upwork is a unfiltered marketplace. I would say it's a chaotic world. Like, so if you post a job on Upwork, right, let's say for a common keyword like Java, you get 300 applications depending on your budget. So how do you filter who is the best guy? Right. So that's a broken problem. Like, you don't have bandwidth. So you have to rely on anecdotal evidences like past history, past work history, past reviews and things like that. But if the guy is really good, he is always occupied. You'll not get the guy who is really good to get to you, right? So Upwork is a broken marketplace, Krishna. It's like the same analogy works across other marketplaces as well. Let's see if you look at Naukri.com, right? So from Naukri, you got this filtered thing called IIM jobs. Right, so which is a curated marketplace, because see, these are meant for large marketplaces, but there is a genuine need for a top 1% marketplace. The same thing with matrimony as well. If you look at Bharat Matrimony or things like that, they definitely have something called as elite matrimony. Similarly with Shadi, VIP Shadi, right? So the same exists across multiple different matchmaking marketplaces, and we wanted to be that elite marketplace. That was the broken thing there with Upwork, Krishna. Like, so it's very hard to filter out the profiles. Like, so you get 300 applications. How do you figure out who is the best? Right. So I think that's the key missing piece. So what we promise is that what we propose, our value proposition is, if you're looking for a Java developer, we get you the top 3 people. You don't need to worry about anything else. You pick and just you interview these guys, how many number of rounds of interview. We also pass them through a lot of interviewing ourselves. It's not like so we really get them through our funnel. Like, so really it's very hard funnel. Like, so we built an assessment product while doing that as well, Krishna. It's a standalone assessment product called TalScale. It's in fact better than HackerRank or Hacker, the pure play standalone assessment product. When Upwork or TopTal started, so the assessment process wasn't there. Like, so even TopTal as of today, it's very manual. Like, so people give you assignment, they will ask you to, there's a like a very similar interview, video call kind of interview that happens and things like that. We automated, and our differentiation has been the automated assessment. We actually use TalScale to really do that assessments internally. So in fact, we actually have a thesis as well behind this, right? This is a pretty bit more techie stuff, but just to add one point there, right? So if you look at the assessment generally, it's more of data structures and algorithms and things like that. Whereas we believe that after 4 years or 5 years of your career, data structures and algorithms are not relevant anymore. It's your MVC skill, it's your ability to do REST APIs, ability to do hookup code and things like that. So we actually have a project-based, world's first project-based, Git-based module, that does this complete filtering on a real-world simulation of skills that are needed for your real job than what you have studied in college. That's the innovation that we are bringing to this world, Krishna. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Raghu, you're fading in and out. Okay. So what happens is when you finish your sentence,
okay.
You're fading in and out, and I think your camera is shaking a little bit.
Okay. So just give me a minute, Krishna. I'll just set this up. I know why it's happening. Just 1 minute.
So great. So if the model is that you were convincing people who were in safe, so-called safe salaried jobs, to come out and then, in some sense, taste the nectar of freedom.
So I would say I have a different philosophy here, Krishna. I think it's probably controversial. I think it's about bonded labor versus freedom. Right. So I think that's my view. I think that's what excites outliers, Krishna. I think that's what we want to make a cult or a community out of these kind of guys.
Yeah, I know. A lot of things haven't still left our country, isn't it? This whole Maharajas.
But
they all live on in other forms, and we have larger than life celebrities, larger than life rich people. We have larger than life politicians. The thing I sort of pains me is that if, for instance, if you take Hollywood as an example, or even the British film industry as an example, no matter what the size, the variety of people is just vast. So think of two people that played Steve Jobs, for instance. Ashton Kutcher. You would not believe
exactly.
You not imagine Ashton Kutcher playing Steve Jobs.
Playing that role.
And the other one is Michael Fassbender. Right? And then and in the Ashton Kutcher Steve Jobs, the Kate Winslet character does not even exist. Or if you look at, let's say, Agatha Christie's Poirot, so Murder on the Orient Express, the latest make, and then you have Kenneth Branagh, and you have Johnny Depp. So if you look at just people in a leading male actor in a leading role, you can come up with 50, 60, 70 names, right? Yes, a few people from Will Smith, to Tom Cruise, and none of them can take their careers for granted.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the important piece, Krishna. I think taking it for granted, right? Yeah.
With the exception of, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio, has had a very dreamy run, right? So from Titanic in 1999 to 2020 today, he's had a dream run. But DiCaprio can also not take his, success for granted. They have deepened and widened the market so much that none of them can say, I am going to dominate the heck out of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And that cultural notion that there should be so many people doesn't strike us at all. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm the only one who sort of see this as odd. So, and for crying out loud, we have 5 times this population.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that is only one language. That's, for
imagine,
one language, which is, and we have 15 official languages. We possibly have 10 film industries. And if you take Bollywood and Tollywood, the two top industries, you can only name about 3 or 4 people who dominate those industries, and after that, the list actually becomes zilch. Right? Something is wrong with the psyche that, and then you see that notion, people want to settle down. In 2002, I had a personal situation where, because of a fight between my father and my uncle, I was penniless and I was on the street. When I was going to college, I was always thinking, when I actually graduate, my dad's going to be in his early 50s, and my dad has already built a home. It's a joint family home. So therefore, and I'm going to get an education. So I wanted to become a chartered accountant. So my thing was, my worst case scenario was, if I try something, I wanted to try something very early on in my life.
So
I said, as a young teenager, I started collaborated with a friend of mine, started a case flow automation software company for legal firms. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about a place to live because my dad's already built a home for me.
Sorted.
If what I do fails, I will practice as a chartered accountant because a chartered accountant is always needed.
Yeah.
So I'll probably practice.
Yeah.
And if I lose all the money that I put in, or if I don't make any money, I can come back and ask my dad at least to feed me.
Yeah.
So I possibly have a 10-year window
to do that experimentation. Yeah.
Do that experimentation.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, around 2001, 2002, when the 10-year window was about to begin, we were forced out of our house. My father became paralyzed. And the entire
responsibility.
I needed that salary badly because my brother was still in college. So all the things that I said, hey, you know what, these are available, I'm going to take risks, completely became upside down. But it didn't stop.
I think that's the beauty of few outliers, Krishna. I think you rightly put in, right? I think we don't back off for anything that life gives us, right? I think that fighting spirit is something that's very. I can see that, so I keep doing this pattern matching across people I meet and things like that. I think that's the key important thing, Krishna. So there could have been like hundreds of scenarios where I would have just lifted my hands and just probably picked a job. But I think not giving up, right? I think whatever hits you, I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is what I feel.
Even now, I was working for a US-based crypto startup. I was a global business head there. And in all of this COVID fiasco, there was a fraud at that, found a very large-scale fraud at that company. As a result of which the company that I was working with, sort of is in sort of like deathbed, right? So they let the people go, and I don't want to work. I don't want to get a job. My passion is to build something large, and I'm at it now. So funny thing is, it is about freelancers are a big target market. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's come back to the starting point still. But so those are for a nation that doesn't culturally support that kind of risk taking. Is it fair to say that these guys had seen the tech ecosystem? They possibly had seen people like you who had gone on to Upwork and these places and then had created outsized outcomes for them and living the dream. So how was that? How many people did you initially manage to convince? Because getting to 60, 70,000 is not a joke, right?
That's right.
And getting the first 60 is also not a joke because of the cultural mindset, right? So that's right, Krishna. I think you probably guessed what would have happened 2-3 years back. So I was literally on calls with people to convince this. So I think the early people who joined are like, so I think I could see that what was the advantage of being in a tier 1 college for the first time. So I was able to pull off people, some high quality, really good guys, at least 10-20 people through my personal network. So I'm generally a very persuasive guy. So I was very convincing and things like that in general in real world. So I was able to show them this is something. Look at this. This is something pretty new, and this is going to change. I was able to convince them on the thesis, and I was fortunate that people believed and bet their career for me. Right, so I think that's the joy, Krishna. How long did that?
In fact, it actually followed an interesting curve, Krishna. The first 10, in fact, the first 2-3 people are really the hardest. It was extreme. Just imagine you started from scratch. You don't have anything to show as a company. You probably have 1-2 clients who are ready to pilot this, not even fully there. I think getting people for the first 2-3 was the biggest challenge, Krishna. I think I still have those memories, implanted pretty deep, right? So I think it became over a period of time, right? I think people kept talking about this. It spread on its own. I think the first 10-20, it was pretty hard. Now, in fact, I don't get on to a call with any developer anymore. So I think
how long did that take? The take 10-20?
Yeah, I think it took about close to 8-10 months, Krishna.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I'm probably fortunate that it took at least smaller amount of time. Otherwise, in a regular period, it would have been like much longer. Like so, given the notice period and things like that, I think. But as somehow I was so it's. From college and things like that, Krishna, from schooling, I was this guy who was like well networked. Like so I was somehow being in the minds of people and things like that. So got that respect somehow and things like that. I think that's something I was able to leverage and pull people initially to get this kickstarted. Yeah.
And then talk to us about some of the inflection points. So then the 10, 20. When did the hundreds happen? When did the thousands happen?
Yeah. So I think what started happening was, I think people started loving this concept. Like so in fact, our first customer was this company called Capillary. So Capillary is a SaaS-based company. In fact, they're still our customer and pretty good. So in fact, I was pretty close with CTO at that time. So he was super convinced because he wasn't able to get similar talent in normal ways. In fact, he used to tell to his recruiters, like, so how was this guy able to get this, right? How was he able to achieve this? Like, why weren't we able to do that, right? So I think that triggered a lot. It kept spreading, and so we also started doing a bit of marketing in a sense, more of a story spreading. I think so. We wanted to get people aware of this. There's something of this sort, an option that you can pick up, right? I think we wanted to evangelize that, and we started doing that. I think in that journey, I think we did, in fact, very interestingly, Krishna, exactly 3 weeks back, we had one international developer from Egypt working with an Indian client of us. Just imagine, right? So Indian client of us, so it's a pretty well-known edtech company. So pretty well-known. They hired a developer from Egypt. Like he's working live with that client. So that was like all these things kept on. So it kept breaking all the the mold of the whole ecosystem of work culture, right? It kept. So I couldn't imagine them. So I don't want to name that company, but you will be surprised. Indian company picking up they're open for that kind of stuff, right? So things like that, Krishna. I think one step after another, milestone we kept achieving. So we do have another couple of partners as well. So both are from IIT Roorkee. So Subhanshu is my good friend from HouseJoy Items. He also did a fitness company which got acquired by HouseJoy. So we met at HouseJoy, we came together and started this. So given their background as well, we were able to pull off a lot of IITians as well. So I think that also helped to bring in a lot of early adapter kind of talent. I think once it started, so it's still growing at a pretty rapid pace. I think Corona has definitely the inflection point, I would say, was I think COVID, Krishna. I'll share one interesting story, right? So I was in conversation with the CTO, one of the unicorn in India. He was not able to digest the fact that how can you work remote? So what about data security, data privacy? You are letting somebody take the laptop with the data, go somewhere and things like that, right? I think those concerns were definitely genuine. To be honest, I think if I would have been in this situation, I think COVID happened and I got a call from him 2 weeks later. How do we do remote? Right. So I think that fundamentally punctured all the questions, Krishna. Whatever the doubts or concerns people had with remote, is it productive? In fact, see what COVID has done, right? It forced people to do this. So there's no other option. I think now people started evaluating how do we become productive? How do we make remote work efficient? I think the whole fundamental story changed. So how do we make remote work productive and efficient? Is that it completely changed. It flipped the Krishna. I think that I would call the inflection point. Just to add some 2 data metrics here, right? So Upwork public listed share, it used to be about $5 in March, just before COVID. Now it's about 7x of that. So in 6 months, it became 7x. Fiverr is another marketplace for freelancers. Fiverr has become 10x. So public listed companies becoming 10x and 8x at that scale. They're already, since they're public, right? Their metrics and things like that. That level of re-rating becoming 10x in a shorter time frame was not seen in any recent times. I think that's how much crazy the space is getting disrupted, Krishna, in general.
So if you were to talk about 3 or 4 growth hacks or growth tactics, growth strategies that you adopted, that put you on the path to growth, what would those be?
Yeah, so I think, we fundamentally believe in growth hacking in general, Krishna. Everything we do, right? So whether it's in, I think there's, so given that we are bootstrapped, so I have actually seen both spending money on performance marketing. So in B2C, you just put dollars and you get users signed up and things like that. You push the accelerator, literally the burning wagon. So in a B2B, you have to build this product marketing experiments very consistently. You need to put your loops inside the product, so which will generate more and more customers. So we had definitely the referral loop, which got more and more customers, both from the candidate side and the freelancer side. And we also had few hacks, so I'll just give some so it's actually very easy for you to figure out so in my view, sale is all about the intent of the other guy. Figuring out who has the intent. Let's say you built a product for example, clinical data or things like that, right? For hospitals, which hospital needs that product? Who have that need? Figuring out and when is the key question in a sale is what I generally believe.
That's right.
Right. So I think figuring that intent and the time. So for us, we were actually fortunate that we were in a domain. If people have the intent to hire someone, they put it on job boards. That intent is publicly visible. What I mean by that,
intent, the moment when that intent manifests itself, and where are they expressing that intent?
Yes, that's right. I think that third piece is something we were fortunate to be in the right domain, Krishna. For example, if you just go to angel.co or indeed.com, if you just get the list of jobs posted for remote, right? I think that's the intent. These companies really need that, and when as well. I think that actually was the biggest growth hack. I think that changed the equation for us, the way you look at it.
So you went up to the job boards and you realized that's where the demand was coming.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you built a supply base, and then so I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
Staffing.
Yeah.
How are you different from staffing?
That's right. Yeah.
So you are a freelancer. You are a freelancer marketplace whereby you convince top talent.
Yeah.
Say, guys, you're on a fixed package. You're tethered to this company.
Right.
And to borrow your words, bonded labor to this company, right? But as opposed to that, you can live a life of freedom, and also earn more. Come with us. We know what the worry on your mind is, which is, hey, I have an opportunity right now. Like you were saying, the biggest, when I talk about freelancers, the tenured ones, the established ones have a network. They know where their leads come from. But still, they are also there in their own mini well. They're in a frog. They're in a frog in a well kind of a situation, right? But what you're bringing is the power of this removing
global scale generally.
Right? You're saying I'll remove the uncertainty,
right?
And then help you. You're afraid of freelancing because you're thinking, what if I leave this? If all of a sudden I don't have work? And therefore, the uncertainty that accompanies a freelancer's life, income unpredictability, all of a sudden becomes real.
Right.
So you're taking that out. So there is a demand that's manifest, and on the company side, you're saying, hey, you want a freelancer perhaps because you don't want somebody for the longer term. Maybe you have a month long gig. Or you have a quarter-long gig. So therefore, you would like to do it with a freelancer. You are scaling right now. You're not sure you want to take all of these
onto your full time.
Right. So therefore, let me reduce the friction that you are going to experience in scale.
That's right.
And you may not even have the internal functions like recruitment, screening, all of that. So I've already pre-vetted them.
Already. That's right.
So you need them. So I'm going to match the two of you.
Exactly.
Right. So so how is it different from staffing? So if you look at, for example, there is a Manish Sabharwal, TeamLease. He's, I think, India's largest staffing organization, but he's on the blue collar side.
Blue collar, exactly, Krishna. I think that's a good point. So I'll probably come to that answer, right? See, in an unskilled workforce, Krishna, it's about the availability. let's say if a driver goes away, you can just quickly replace the driver. Probably it takes 5 minutes for him to get used to your vehicle, and from there. So I think there it's a very different game, Krishna. Like in an unskilled blue collar workforce, like it's a very, very different game, because you're not heavily worried about the quality of people. Like a driver is a driver as long as he's sensible and things like that, right? Like when there's no differentiation. Whereas a white collar workforce is very, very different. Like so here assessment and sticking to that quality is very, very important, Krishna. Like that's what we have seen. I'll take a step back and I'll share one other point, Krishna. So what we have seen, right? I'm a developer being in India, right? So currently, let's say I'm working with Google. So there is Airbnb in the Bay Area. In fact, I have a lot of friends working there. Like very similar to the quality of people that are working in India Google development, right? So Airbnb pays about $300K. That's the kind of CTC generally they get there. Here the Google developer is getting probably about $30-40K. Both are very similar, Krishna. Like in terms of quality, I know both these people very well. Like in fact, I would rate the Google developer in India higher than what Airbnb hired for $300K.
Sure.
See, why is that difference existing? Right? It's because of the location constraint.
Yeah, this is the cost of the Bay Area.
Exactly, right? So if I take the location out of the equation, like what I mean by that, right? Like we believe that the right talent may not be in your zip code, in the same zip code. And the opportunities in the world are concentrated, whereas the talent in the world is distributed. So you look for a couple of hotspots in the world, tech hotspots in general, Krishna, like in both the Bay Areas, right? Like both the sides of the Bay Areas, whereas the talent across the world is distributed. Like so you look at the IQ curves across Africa or Eastern Europe or things like that. In fact, Eastern Europe has like really good high quality developer talent, but they're not able to go to US because of the visa constraints and things like that. You keep seeing this visa becoming much more problematic and things like that. You're taking everything out of the equation. Say, we actually want to make the world a better place, Krishna. We want to make the world a better place by connecting people with more opportunities. Like let's say, for example, the developer in India, if he is able to work with Airbnb directly, sitting in India, so probably he will get 2x, 3x the salary as well. And Airbnb will also have it's a win-win for everyone. It's really a win-win. So we actually want to enable that. So a normal staffing firm can't do this. So the problem for a normal staffing firm that they are local, so very geographically oriented and things like that. So whereas we are actually flipping the whole thing and we are saying that what if we take out the location and we make careers for people who are working remotely across the globe, and we connect the best people with the best companies.
So the other thing, so perhaps, if I'm guessing this right, because these people are freelancers, they are not on your rolls.
Yes, yeah. So there are few people who are on our rolls. Roles in a sense, we act as a layer of intermediation. I'll give you an example.
Understand. So obviously, because you're doing the matching part, so you're matching the demand with supply. So in my mind, in staffing, most people don't. Mostly, people do not expect to have a choice. Which is, they do not expect to have a choice of where they will work.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So it is like telling a staffing company saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to work only if you allow me to work at XYZ companies.
Yep.
And the staffing company is going to say, sorry, I cannot guarantee that.
Yep.
Right. You have to take up. So in my mind, if your model allows the person to say no.
Yeah. So he's full. In fact, he has the 100% right on what he wants to do, Krishna. He can pick and choose the company he wants to go for and things like that. We give that full freedom to the candidate. Yeah.
And then obviously that even in staffing, the other side always has had that freedom. So the company that is actually engaging that talent can always say, hey, this person doesn't fit the bill. That part doesn't change. Yeah. But it's on this side that they get to make that choice.
Yeah. So in fact, a very interesting thing happened, Krishna. If you really look at US, right, most of the staffing companies are generally concentrated in Dallas. There's a specific reason for that. So they want it to be somewhere between both the coasts, so that they can keep shifting. Yeah, exactly. They want it to be center point, right? See, effectively, location or the geography was the key constraint. The way the business model was built.
Yeah.
And we actually, if I take out that location from the equation, Krishna, I can actually, if you really think of it, we are disrupting multiple things. The complete staffing, we're actually changing a lot, Krishna, like with this taking out that location constraint. Right? I think we want to enable remote workforce. I think that's the fundamental agenda where we want to go towards.
So what are we likely to see this do, Raghu? The way I've imagined is, if you know Sam Altman of Y Combinator, recently posted a tweet saying, I am long on in-person work.
Okay.
Which means for the longer term, he believes that in-person work is going to be relevant. And remember, I think late 2000s, whenever Marissa Mayer became head of Yahoo, the first thing she actually did was she cancelled work from home.
Interesting. Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
So the funny thing is, I think this is still a work in progress.
That's right.
The Indian IT companies have been doing remote work for more than 2 decades.
Yep.
So they've been doing that on a project basis, owning outcomes, that sort of stuff. But outside of path-breaking things, either we are unaware of any path-breaking things that have come out of them, right? It has definitely created a huge amount of impact. It's brought in a lot of forex inflow. It's made trade imbalance a lot more
better.
But I'm just, COVID has changed a couple of paradigms, right? Pre-COVID, you had a situation where you had 2,000 people on the same floor,
right?
And in some sense, it's an oxymoron, because how do you manage 2,000 people?
2,000 people, exactly.
Well organized. Right.
Hmm.
And that also created a great deal of disengagement and disenchantment with working for a large organization.
Exactly.
Because one is lifestyles are so stressed out, screwed up in some sense, and the traffic menace. What it is, it created a great income, but also accompanied with great stress. Right? It felt like you can't have one without the other.
That's right.
But it's changing. So COVID put a stop to that. So now now the thing is, a handful of people, whoever are the ones that are the decision making, creative, those types, hardly in a smaller office. So therefore offices become smaller. So you can still have a large workforce, but a distributed workforce as a result of this. So we are likely to see that happen. Even in larger US American organizations, a very handful of people do the creative part. The rest of them are really executing, right? So in some sense, like a worker bee. So
that's right. Right? So in fact, the world evolved from 3 phases, Krishna. I think I would add a couple of points here, right? I think remote is a work in progress. It's a curve that was growing on its own. I think what COVID did was shorten the curve. It accelerated that adoption. I think the way I look at it, right? I think if you look at it like 300, 400 years back, like when we all used to work together in factories or like even physical location, you go to that physical factory and things like that. That's probably in terms of networks, like I would call that the single concentrated dot. Like you go there and do that. So then you started getting conglomerates. Like you probably have a US office, then you have distributed office across the world. Like each of the country has its own branch office and things like that. I think that's the second model of evolution, where the concentration was happening in particular locations, but you still have that master-slave hierarchy of like top to bottom and things like that. I think the third phase of this workforce evolution is fully distributed. There is no anymore a centerpiece or a physical office kind of stuff. You let people operate from everywhere. It's fully distributed network. Like there is no office at all. In fact, there are a lot of companies doing that and living that, and were able to prove that. Think of the benefits, Krishna. Look at the real estate cost savings. Real estate without our realization is the biggest cost that we incur. Especially if you look at the balance sheets and the P&L statements of the companies. So real estate is the biggest. That's fundamentally going to change. And we actually believe fundamentally that remote work will make the world a very, very better place, like distributed, and it's also very resilient. Like, I mean, the way I look at it, right? The distributed networks are in general very, very resilient compared to concentrated networks. Like, I mean, so in terms of networking as well and things like that, I think our view, Krishna, like, I mean, time has already come for remote. I think there's no stopping anymore. It's about the real question is. A lot of people have complained about whether remote is productive or not. I want to answer that question as well, right? So I think the remote is feeling unproductive because people are not able to travel freely. You're concentrated in a home. Like, I mean, you're just being in a home, like, I'm sitting at the home, like, I mean, for the day long. You'll definitely get exhausted just being on calls and things like that. But just imagine a scenario where you got vaccine, you're able to go for a movie in the evening, but whereas you're working from home. That's when the real productivity hits, Krishna. Like, I mean, I have lived that life. Personally, I have lived that life. I don't think people, once they taste that, like, they will not come back.
But I do think to Raghu that there are a couple of angles. I think the tech industry is a little bit of a not analogous to every industry out there.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's in fact, I probably should have set the context, Krishna. I think what we are doing is majorly for the tech industry.
Correct. Yeah. Because for instance, in tech, now your assessment levels are established, as assessment tools are established.
Yeah.
You can say who performs at what level.
Yeah.
Now, tech to a large extent behaves every bit unlike what normal humans behave like, right? You do you know how to print hello world. You know, these are the steps now. 10 different programmers might just have slight differences in their code.
Yeah.
But if you did follow that pattern, you know that hello world is going to get printed.
It comes to that output. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, as far as tech is concerned, to a great degree, the questions that surround remote work, which is, how do I find out if this person is productive? Second one, how do I know that this person actually worked on it? How do I know this person is actually creative and contributing enough?
Right? Yeah. Measuring that work productivity. Yeah.
Because ultimately and if we put it all together, it comes down to one word, which is impact.
That's right.
Did this person really deliver and create impact?
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
In tech, a lot of that is actually measurable, predictable, and then can be looked at.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, take marketing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you have 10 separate companies, all 10 companies, even if they're in the similar products area, the strategies are likely to be different. Because right now, we have launched a payment product for called Vouch. Because the freelance community, especially the fledgling ones, experience a lot of uncertainty in payments.
That's right. Yep.
And more so in the Indian scenario, because people don't pay. Even if they don't have, even if they have money, they don't pay.
Yeah. You need that escrow and things like that, Krishna.
Correct. Yeah. So we after experiencing that problem ourselves extensively, we realized, when we looked around, we realized it's one of those things which is very pervasive.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah.
And people hadn't thought about solving it. And it is like, I'll come back to that. So in running our marketing, we are realizing that even if we do pick experienced people, just building that creative fusion and that excitement remote, it's just not working.
Yeah. So I think Krishna, there's a point to add here, right? So I think the way, I think we will evolve on this, Krishna. I think, I think probably we are remote 1.0. What I mean by that, right? In fact, we are actually doing a lot of experiments inside our company itself. What we are planning to do is weekly, one day marketing team will come to the office and sync. Probably Monday's marketing team, Tuesday's the finance team, Wednesday's tech team. So it would be 1 or 2 days instead of a full-fledged 5-day work week.
Right.
So that it would be a hybrid approach is what I feel, Krishna. I think.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I think hybrid is where the world is going to go.
Yeah.
Even in terms of the way we look at workplaces and all of that,
right.
It is going to be a combination of multiple satellite offices.
That's right.
Smaller offices where creative work gets done.
That's
and once the creative work is done, you go back and then the tactical, operational, execution heavy things get done.
That's
and then you put measurements around it. And then when you need to check progress and ignite another spark of creativity, you come back again.
That's right. Yeah.
I think you're bang on that.
Yeah, I think hybrid is the way forward, Krishna. Like, I think we fundamentally believe that, and we are already doing that. Yeah.
But think of that. There's an interesting corollary outcome to that as well, Raghu. Think of it this way. For people who follow investing, whenever there is a negative event, it's always like, okay, the world is going to come to an end, kind of apocalyptic.
I think the fear driven. Yeah.
But if you think of it for a moment. The earlier paradigm was if you needed 100 people, the whole notion was all 100 had to be local.
That's right. Yeah. In the office, like when you need to get them in there, make them sit in that office. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, which means I need 100 people office.
Yeah.
Now, if I have 100 people, if at any point in time I need 20, the 80 are remote, let's say. Right? So now the notion is, okay, travel industry is going to go to dogs because nobody's traveling, and it is not true, right? If anything, the other 80 will possibly need to travel.
That's right. Yeah.
More frequently.
That's right.
Instead of commuting
to the office, yeah.
They are going to travel.
Yeah.
So if there is any airline or any CEO, who's thinking about this in like a 10-year time frame. He's going to start thinking, you know what? This is how it's going to transform.
No, actually, very true, Krishna. In fact, we have an interesting theory internally. There won't be any more something called as Silicon Valley. The next phase would be remote valley. So, right? So everywhere we call this the remote valley. So the world as a unified place, and people get chance to travel and collaborate. I think it will open up. I think it will make the world a really, really better place, Krishna. I think there is a bit social angle to this as well. I'll share a couple of interesting stories that happened. So there's a lady, she took a break after her marriage of kid and things like that, right? Because she wanted to be closer to the kid and things like that. There was no company that was ready to give a work from home opportunity. Just like 2 years back, I was talking about 2 years back scenario. And we are we said that you be at home, you be closer to the kid, you manage whatever stuff that you need to take care and things like babysitting and things like that. And you work remotely. And it really transformed her life, Krishna. In fact, this is actually the social impact of it, right? In fact, I actually have a senior from my area, college area. He's fully physically disabled. He is like the IIT All India rank 2, 2 years before my batch, and he right now works at Google. Google literally, there's a pretty good widespread media articles around him and things like that as well. For people like that, who can't commute, because of the disability and things like that, I think remote is a game changer, Krishna. I think, look at the social impact of things like that, right? If you are sick and you're not able to travel, generally in a regular environment, you are forced to travel. So I think there are these positive elements which probably we don't encounter day in day out, because I see this day in day out, right? Because I'm literally I'm looking at people across and all. I think when I see these stories, when I see these real changes that are happening, Krishna, I think that brings me the happiness. I think
that's the beauty, Raghu. When you launch a product, you cannot possibly imagine all the use cases and
exactly. No, when I started, my agenda was to make travel and things like that.
Right.
But the way it is enabling a lot more people, right? I think that's the beauty.
That is life, because the same person is a father, a brother, and he has multiple uses, right? So he takes on a multiple.
Exactly, right? Yeah, depending on the context. Yeah.
So life is multidimensional. It's just that at that point in time when we launch the product, we cannot humanly foresee every dimension where it can be used.
Exactly.
Take Airbnb, for example. Before COVID, it was a darling. COVID crashed everything.
Completely, yeah.
Right? But that's not the end. It's just an inflection point in the evolution of that company, right? So, Raghu, we've had a long chat. Let's come back to some nuts and bolts. Sure. So, the initial capillary, what were some other growth challenges that you experienced in your scale journey?
Sure. I think so. I think the key thing for me was getting the right set of people, Krishna. I think we fundamentally believe that high quality talent is something we really want to emphasize on, right? So I think what really changes the game. So people are not very comfortable working in a remote ecosystem, Krishna. I'll give an example, right? I think the work cultures, like, I mean, while working remote, like, I mean, let's say you connected a Eastern European talent with the US, or the language barriers and things like that. I think those are still the fundamental constraints. We actually have something called as remote boot camp internally, where we make people get ready in terms of making them enabled for remote working. Like, I mean, so I think, see, in remote, like, I mean, in a physical world, it's a very different style of working, Krishna. Like, I mean, if you see the person in front of you probably for 8-9 hours, you know that he's clocking hours. Like, I mean, so in a remote work, like, I mean, tough to judge that, like, I mean, how much effort he has put in, how much work. So it's a think of a completely fresh developer that joined, or a fresh marketer or someone joined him. Only his work is supposed to talk. Right. So I think because you don't know the person in general, like, I mean, how hardworking and things like that, other than the anecdotal evidences you have, I think those are still the constraints we are working on in terms of building that trust layer in terms of remote. We are actually launching a timesheets product, Krishna. Like, in fact, that's a path-breaking timesheets product, which measures your productivity, the kind of tools that you're working on, whether you are able to clock 8 hours and things like that, to keep transparent between the amount of time worked. So it's a bit like, I mean, so it's going to bring in a lot of transparency into that marketplace, right? We actually want to take forward the remote ecosystem. That's the thesis in general. And whatever problem statement that we are keep bumping into, like, I mean, just like you mentioned, escrowing is like a big challenge. I think over a period of time, all this multiple entrepreneurs will solve multiple problems, Krishna. Like, I think that's the beauty, right? Like, I mean, we all work together making the vision of remote. I think, see, once this ecosystem builds up, Krishna, I think for a new guy who is coming and picking up a career, like, I mean, so he can be like much more peaceful than what we all went through, and I think world will become a much better place where we are going towards. Yeah.
So a young company actually making an acquisition is a pretty bold move.
Yeah.
It only indicates the degree of confidence that you guys have in yourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that it's a reverse acquisition of sorts. It's not a US company acquiring an Indian company, but the other way around.
And interestingly, Krishna, Indies is also VC funded company, and whereas we are bootstrapped. That's another angle to this as well.
Yeah. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, Krishna. Like, I mean, so we realized in our part of evolution, we realized probably the demand side is heavily concentrated in the US. Like, in terms of opportunities and things like that, we wanted to set foot in the US market in general. Like, I mean, we were able to prove that. In fact, we work with Grab in Singapore, Gojek. We work with Southeast Asia, all the unicorns, Byju's, Swiggy, Ola, you name it, we have it kind of stuff. We were able to prove the thesis very well in India, Krishna. We wanted to go towards that US market. So we debated a couple of options internally. One, whether we start from scratch, launch the product, take that organic path and things like that. So we felt, in fact, we actually bumped into this entrepreneur. He's from ex-housing, IIT Bombay, Nitesh Agarwal. Like, I mean, he has been building this similar journey parallelly much before he started, and he raised funding and things like that. He was able to take the business to a decently successful level there. And we felt there's probably a potential opportunity. Like, when that will shorten the curve for us in US. Like, and so through that, we were actually able to get pretty good high quality logos, BCG, Domino's, Uber, and these are US customers, right? He has been working with them and things like that. Like, I mean, I think that actually, so we felt credibility is the key thing for us to really crack the market in US. And we wanted to build that references and customer logos and things like that. That was the key decision, Krishna. I think financially, it's an interesting challenge given that you are bootstrapped, they are VC funded, but you are going aggressive, right? Like, I think probably we are a bit aggressive that way, Krishna, in general. And fortunately for us, we did this acquisition pre-COVID. If it would have been post-COVID, the valuations would have been like, right? So I think that was a bit, I would call probably we were a bit fortunate that day, to get it at the right time.
So the VCs are no longer in the picture?
Yeah, so there's no longer. So the entire team joined us, the operating team. And Indies is currently being run as a standalone, separate, independent brand on its own. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's in store the next 5 years, Raghu?
Yeah, so I think
you've already answered that question. No, I take that back. You've already answered that question when I asked some of these questions, it felt like we were creating some sort of an echo chamber here, because you're echoing my thoughts and I'm echoing your thoughts. It makes for really dangerous.
The conversation.
Right? Because unless there is a little bit of friction, you don't get interesting perspectives out of it. For people who are starting up, and given your own trajectory of doing B2C and then doing B2B, I think in some sense you are being too humble in saying you just worked on B2B. You were so excited by what happened with you. You realize that, and that whole angle of bonded labor versus freedom, you're like, whether it has a B2B label or the B2C.
Yeah, it doesn't matter for me, right? Exactly. Yeah, I think probably that's right.
I like it. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Even I think about it that way. I'm not thinking about
whether it's a B2C or a physical. Yeah, putting into that mold thinking and things like that.
Somebody's just putting a label on it. For me,
exactly.
That is an exciting challenge.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So your experience is very eclectic. Working for a telecom major, which is mostly a boring job, to be honest. Right? Networks and switches and signals. And all this 4G, 5G is just marketing verbiage on an otherwise boring industry.
Right?
And from there you did something exciting, and you find yourself bang amidst COVID, right? But you know what strikes me as interesting is the number of disruptive events we seem to have. And the frequency with which disruptive events seem to happen across the world now, right? I don't know if that is because of the hyper-connected nature of the world right now, which means that one thing that happens elsewhere.
I think the impact spreads definitely faster, right?
Definitely. So therefore, in this kind of a scenario, keeping in there is much that needs to be done in India. I think we've pushed Moore's law to a great extent. We want a Moore's law equivalent for our roads and for our infrastructure.
Yes, physical infrastructure.
Because we can talk about $5 trillion economy till the cows come home and then they've done and dusted. But until we don't improve that, right? Cows will keep coming home and onto the streets and all of that, right? So what's your? So I want to talk about, get your perspective. What sort of innovation do you think we should see, and what sort of different advice would you give young entrepreneurs?
So I think regarding the advice to young entrepreneurs, Krishna, I think I would say, I actually believe in no regrets framework, living life in it's easier said than done, given the physical constraints and things like that, right? I think for the young entrepreneurs, Krishna, I think they have a wider, beautiful choices. I think the hard work that has been put in by the people before them, right? So I think it made at least the world a better place compared to what they went through. So I think that way, I think they have a much better canvas, much better way to express themselves and do things which weren't even able to think before, right? I think for them it's something big. I would definitely suggest people to take more risks, especially for people in India. I think that's something not part of our DNA. I think that's something we have. So I think for me, not taking risk is risk. The way I look at it is very, very simple, right? Not taking risk is risk, right? So I think the way the world is evolving and things like that, I think there's only one life. Go and chase your dreams. I think that's my advice to the young entrepreneurs, Krishna, in general.
When you live as you're a silkworm in a cocoon right now, eventually somebody will strip you of your silk. So a lot of us don't know that. And by the time we realize it, it's too late.
That's right. I think it's better to be your own path than somebody else stripping that, right? Exactly.
So Raghu, this has been a fabulous and a very interesting conversation. I think we've discussed a wide variety of topics. I commend your down to earth. You're so humble for all the stuff that you've done. It is somebody can just miss all the important points that you said because of the simplicity with which you deliver. And all the grounded language that you use. I know this is just the beginning, from cruise scale to indies, and COVID is just like Bernoulli's principle. You have wings now, And the wind beneath your wings is COVID,
automatically will lift you up. Yeah.
Right? And then it will lift you up. I think Bernoulli's principle is going to act. And that'll be interesting. I have a feeling we'll possibly talk again in the next couple of years. With you guys having made a huge mark in the US market and having gone places. It was great to have you on Maharajas of Scale. We wish you the very best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, Krishna. Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this story. If this story made a difference to you, tell us by leaving a comment on the website or our social media channels. Help us spread the love by subscribing, liking, and sharing our show. We welcome speaker suggestions and collaboration. Write to me at tanya@maharajasofscale.com.